look around at the world and wonder why it's so unequal? I mean, how did we end up with billionaires and poverty, with kings and commoners, especially when for most of human history, it seems like we didn't? Well, this isn't just a modern problem. The roots of it go way, way back, about 10,000 years, actually, to a single revolutionary invention that changed everything. And to get it, we have to start with a paradox that's right at the heart of the human story. So let's dive right into our investigation with this paradox. It's this huge contradiction in our own history. For almost all of our time on this planet, human society looked one way, and then, boom, in what's really just a blink of an eye, historically speaking, it became something completely different. And this really puts that paradox in stark terms. For 99% of our history, we humans lived in what you'd call egalitarian societies. Think small, mobile groups where power was shared, and there were no permanent chiefs or ruling classes. But then, in just the last 1% of our timeline, everything flips on its head. Widespread inequality suddenly becomes the norm. And that dramatic shift, well, that's the core of our mystery. So this is the big question, right? After thousands and thousands of years of living in a relatively equal way, what happened? What single thing could have possibly been the catalyst for such a massive fundamental change in how we live? Well, the answer, the culprit, if you will, in our 10,000-year-old mystery, it wasn't a person, it wasn't an empire, it was a brand new revolutionary idea that totally changed our relationship with the world around us, the concept of surplus. The real turning point, as you can see here, was the Neolithic Revolution. Around 10,000 years ago, we started domesticating plants and animals. We became farmers. And for the very first time, this allowed societies to produce way more food than they needed just to survive, creating the world's first agricultural surpluses. And we're not just talking about a few extra baskets of grain here. Archaeologists have dug up Neolithic grain silos that could hold over 1,000, 4,000, even 10,000 liters. This wasn't just a family's rainy day fund. This was a massive, controllable resource. So here's the crucial point. An agricultural surplus is simply having more stuff, more food, more resources than your community needs to get by day to day. Before this, life was all about finding enough to eat today. After this, well, life became about managing, storing, and most importantly, controlling all that extra stuff. And that changed absolutely everything. Okay, so you've got this huge new resource, but how does that actually translate into kings and peasants? How does a pile of grain and a silo end up building a pyramid of power? It's almost like a recipe, really. First, having a surplus means that some people can stop spending all their time producing food. These are your first non-producers: priests, warriors, administrators, the first elites. Second, these extra resources can now be saved up, stored, and passed down. That's literally the birth of wealth. And finally, whoever controls the surplus, well, they control society. That control becomes the very foundation for power and for permanent, baked-in inequality. And this is so important to get. The first elites didn't just show up with bigger clubs and take over. They rose to power by managing and redistributing these new surpluses. They became the essential gatekeepers of the community's resources. And from that powerful position, they built a whole new social structure, a hierarchy. It's a really compelling theory, but is there any actual proof? Let's put on our detective hats for a second and look at the hard evidence that archaeologists have literally dug up from the ground. How do you spot a 4,000-year-old king? Well, archaeologists look for clues in burials. They look at the quality and quantity of objects buried with a person, the size and complexity of their tomb, its location, and of course, they look for special prestige objects, things like ceremonial weapons or scepters. These are the fingerprints of power left behind in the dirt. And when we look across Neolithic Europe, you can see this evidence just pop up and grow over time. Around 2800 BC, battle axes, these clear symbols of warrior status, start appearing in graves. Fast forward a bit to 2000 BC, and we find these massive, elaborate tombs in places like Lübingen, Germany, with gold treasures inside giant oak chambers. Then you get these absolutely incredible one-of-a-kind artifacts like the Mold Gold Cape in Wales or the Never Sky Disc in Germany, buried right alongside swords and axes. The pattern is just undeniable. And the difference is just staggering. I mean, take a look at this comparison. A typical burial from that time might just be a simple pit in the ground with some basic pottery. The elite burials at Lübingen?
We're talking gold ornaments and bronze weapons inside a massive chamber made of oak beams, all covered by a huge mound of earth. This is what archaeologists call social stratification, a society divided into layers. And you can see it plain as day in how they treated their dead.
Just think about that mold cape for a second. It's described as being crafted from finely hammered gold with intricate patterns. And objects like that would have required immense resources and incredibly specialized skills to create. It's not just a piece of clothing, it's basically a giant golden billboard advertising wealth, status, and power for everyone to see. Okay, so if inequality isn't our natural state, if it's a system that was actually built, what does that mean for us today? Can we take lessons from this ancient history to design better, fairer systems for ourselves? I absolutely love this idea from the source material. It just reframes the whole conversation. Equality isn't some magical default state that we lost somewhere along the way. No, it's a technology, a set of social tools that we have to actively build and maintain to keep dominance in check. And here's the modern challenge. Hierarchy really took off when that agricultural surplus made it cheap and easy to control other people. Today, we have new kinds of surpluses of data, of capital, and they create very similar risks. So the big question is, can we flip that? Can we actually design our teams, our companies, our communities in a way that makes fairness the easy option and dominance the expensive one? The source suggests we totally can, and it gives us 3 core principles to work with. First, design for visibility. Make sure decisions and resources are out in the open, so power can't hide in the shadows. Second, build for federation. Distribute power out across networks instead of letting it all concentrate at the top of a pyramid. And third, provide for exit. Give people the freedom to walk away from systems that are unfair. These are the tools for engineering fairness. And this really brings us to our final, powerful takeaway. The rise of inequality, it wasn't some inevitable law of nature. It was an accidental byproduct of a new technology, agriculture, that we just hadn't learned how to manage yet. And that leaves us with a pretty profound question for our own time. If hierarchy was engineered 10,000 years ago, can fairness be engineered today?